On the back table, some sheepskin, some various other things, honey, whatever I could get from Amazon. We also have some of Steve's reports, okay, on the back. One lists some mission works, what they're doing there, what the graduates are doing. That's kind of interesting. The other two, one is from Papua New Guinea, and the other one is Steve's report from last quarter, I guess it was. But this is unique work. It has far-reaching implications in that part of the world, okay? So it is unique in that standpoint. Steve's been here many times. We welcome him again, and he's going to bring us up to date on what's happening today. Thank you.
Right, am I on? Did I push the right button? Yes, I am on. I think I'm going to try and come down here and see if this works. Hey, it's great to be back with you. Yep, that works. It's a tremendous blessing and privilege to be able to come and visit with you. It was just a year ago that I was here. And normally it's every 2 years, and it'll probably get back to every 2 years, but it just worked out this time to be here from 1 year ago. So I was trying to think what I would share this morning, because in my mind I'll just tell the same story I did a year ago. And you've all got fantastic memories, I'm sure you'll remember that. So what I want to do this morning is kind of use this theme, that God opens doors, God connects people, and then God completes his mission. And so that'll be my theme for this morning, and then I'll weave the story of the college. In fact, I'm going to weave our stories into that. The story of how God has connected us together. He's opened the door for that and connected us, and then of course the mission that takes place as a result of that. And I think the older I get, hopefully, the more I'm open to the fact that God does need to be the one who's doing things. It's not us. We just do it in response to what God is doing. And if we're not going through the doors God opens, you know, as a young person, I'm trying to force everything open and do what I want to do. But that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to end up, we might do good things, but we may not be doing what God wants us to do. And so the theme this morning is to try and help us to see that we need to let God be the one opening the doors, and then seeing what connections he makes, and then it'll be his mission that gets done and not what I want done or what you want done. So I'm going to go back and talk about, I'll start with this biblical story of Paul in Acts. Now I'm sure you've got fantastic memories because I preached this sermon here about 5 or 6 years ago. And you all remember this slide and the story of Paul being in the middle of Asia or Turkey. You remember that, right? For sure, or are you a bunch of liars? Sorry to say, Scott, they probably don't remember our sermons. No, they don't. So I could have actually preached this again then. All right. Hey?
He said you've been here before.
Right. I was saying to someone before, my wife has to keep... Steve, that was a joke. I take things too seriously, so we're in the middle of a meeting or talking with people and they make this joke and I'm thinking business. I'm thinking, how do I communicate one? Steve, that was just a joke. You don't have to answer that one. Anyway, Jill's not with me on this trip and I will mention that at the end. If I forget to mention it, remind me, okay? Because that's the important stuff. Okay, back to Acts chapter 16. In Acts chapter 16, Paul finds himself in the middle of what we call Turkey today. In the Bible, it's the Galatian region. And he's on his missionary journey. And if you go back in Acts, you'll remember they were over in Antioch, and it was actually the Spirit, God, who brought them together and said, I want you to go out. God is behind all of this. So they've been visiting the churches that have been established in this Galatian region. And what the text says in Acts chapter 16, actually we should probably read that. Let's just read that together. We won't read all of that text. Let's just read probably verse 9, I think. No, we'll go back. Verse 6. We'll start in verse 6. They had passed through the Phrygian and Galatian region after being forbidden by the Holy Spirit to speak the word in Asia. And after they came to Mysia, they were trying to go into Bithynia, and the Spirit of Jesus did not allow them. And passing by Mysia, they went down to Troas. And a vision appeared to Paul in the night. A man of Macedonian was standing and pleading with him, saying, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." When he had seen the vision, we immediately sought to leave for Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. So here Paul is in this region. He wants, it says, to go to Asia. He wants to head out this way. Ultimately, that would lead him to the city of Ephesus. Ephesus was kind of like the mega city of the day. Along the way, he would pass through Colossae. Many of the 7 churches of Asia we read in the book of Revelation are all in that sort of region. So that's where Paul wanted to go. But you'll notice the text said the Spirit forbid them going. For some reason, God was not wanting to open up the doors for the mission to go that way. So the next thing we read is he wants to go to Bithynia, and that's kind of directly north. And up there on the Black Sea are some other fairly significant cities. But the text says the Spirit forbid them. God was not opening that door. And so they end up in a little city, not a city, it's only a port village called Troas. I'm not sure how to compare that here. You don't have any ports nearby, do you? That's a joke. I could get sidetracked, but I won't. Okay. What time do I need to finish? 1:15? Yeah. Yep. Is that not 10 past? 20. Okay, plenty of time. Oh, let's get sidetracked. No, just kidding. Troas. So Troas is just an insignificant fishing village. So in terms of mission work, Paul's probably scratching his head thinking, why on earth am I here? There's just nothing here. But then he has the vision, and the vision is to come over to Macedonia. Now, if we kept reading through there, we would probably miss what's actually happening here. So we'll just stop for a moment and think about what's happening here. You'll probably notice, let's see if I push the right button here. I do, here we go. I've put a dotted line on the map here, and so the dotted line represents the Asian continent to the European continent. So being called over to Macedonia is God opening a door. God wants the gospel to move to the outermost parts of the earth. You remember what Jesus originally said about the gospel going out? Well, now it's going from Asia, the region Israel's in, to a whole new continent. And this is huge. This is significant. And of course, we don't see that. We just read right on through, and he jumps on a boat, just goes across a little stretch of water. But this is God opening a massive door to a whole new continent. So if we kept reading through the text, he goes across, lands at Neapolis, it takes a short journey to Philippi, and of course he meets with a group of women. This is kind of, I think, ironical. I think it's funny. Who's the first person he baptized? Lydia. And where was Lydia from? Thyatira. And where's Thyatira? Right in here where he was forbidden to go. Anyway, that's just, I think God has a sense of humour too. But then you keep reading. So he's at Philippi, moves down to Thessalonica, across to Berea, a wonderful story of the Christian growth there. Winds his way eventually down to Athens, and then finally to Corinth. And so Paul does significant mission work in this whole region here. Eventually he'll get over here when God's timing is right, but for whatever reason it wasn't right. So here we've got this story very clearly laid out for us, that God closed some doors but opened another door. And then when Paul gets into these different cities, he connects people, significant people, important people, influential people in these cities who help Paul navigate being around a new city. And then, obviously, this is God's mission work that is completed. So it's wonderful to read that in the book of Acts, right? How does that work for us today? You know, one of the wonderful things about the Bible, it's full of story. It is a story. It's a story of redemption. It's a story of God bringing people back to himself. And whether we start at the beginning or the end, it's just full of how God opens doors, connects people, and his mission takes place. But we don't always stop and think, okay, how does that work for us today? And I have a book recording that. We're too busy in our lives to stop and think about. I believe God works the same today as he's always worked. He's opening his doors, he's connecting people, and his mission takes place. So, sometimes that's obvious when you read it in the book of Acts. Sometimes in our lives it's obvious because some significant things happen, but other times we just don't stop and contemplate how God actually is at work. So, this is what I want to share with you this morning, is the journey that we have had together, how God has opened doors, connected people, and his mission takes place. It's been a long story, a long journey. I don't know if I remember everything in chronological order. I may get a couple of things mixed up. But for us, for me, it starts with this couple here. Actually, if we had a long time, I'd go back about 3 couples before this. But anyway, Ron and Shirley Downey. Do you know them? You may have met them. But generally speaking, they're not known to you. Okay. I first met them in California. They had been missionaries in, I want to say, Melbourne, Australia. And at the time, there was someone living and working there from Maryland Heights. And they came back, and my first introduction was to an elder here at Maryland Heights, no longer here, but they connected us to the elder here. It was, yes, and so that was the original contact that was made. Winding the clock forward just a little bit of time, do you recognise this person? Some of you do? You do? Andrea. Andrea was a student at Harding, and came to visit as a part. We had Harding groups come and do internships with us under the directorship of, guidance of a wonderful couple. And probably around the year 2000, 2001, Andrea came, and I believe she actually stayed with us for the 6 or 8 weeks that she was there in New Zealand. And so we had a connection through Andrea, we had a connection through missionaries in Australia, and so we've got this connection being built between ourselves, the mission in the South Pacific, and Maryland Heights. Over the years I've had different connections, but probably this guy in the middle here has been the long-term connection. I grabbed the pictures off your website, but I think when we met neither of us had grey hair. Is that right? I'm pretty sure that was quite some time ago, and then Steve passed on the mission oversight to another Steve. This is the best congregation for me to come to, because I mean, honestly, I go to other places and I can't quite remember people's names sometimes. I'm like, oh, this is great. Steve, and Steve. So, and you've got another Steve. Yeah. We had the same at home for a little while. We had 3 or 4 Steves in the congregation. But There's two of us left, yep. And then, of course, in recent years, Philip now oversees that. So this is a 25-year journey of connection between us and the church here, you here at Maryland Heights. And you've been engaged in our ministry for Jill and I and the work that we do for around, I'm going to say 20 years, maybe 28 years. And there may have been some pauses in that, I think, over the years, but re-establishing of that as well. So normally I would now tell you all about the ministry that we're doing. It's actually not just ministry, it's ministries. We're involved in multiple different things. The core of that, of course, is the work of the South Pacific Bible College. And I'd normally give you an update on that, but I remember the one I did last year, and you remember all of that, right? Okay, so I'll just give you a quick overview, and then I want to go on and talk about how God's at work. I think when I was here a year ago, let me think a year ago. Yeah, we had just opened up the country. Of course, we've been locked down, literally locked the borders down of our country. So around about February, they announced you could go and come back. You could always go, you just couldn't come back because of COVID. So we decided to go, and we were here, I think, around this time last year. Around the middle of the year, they opened the borders for non-New Zealanders to be able to come in. And then around October, they opened the borders for students, international students, to be able to come back in. So when I was here last year, we only had one full-time student. We had about 4 regular part-time students. And then we had started a new online program for chaplaincy. And that's going really, really well. Last month we started our 3rd intake for chaplaincy students. We now have around, I think, 12 students enrolled in that program. And in our regular on-site, on-campus program, we've got students from the Solomon Island. He was there last year. We've got a couple. He's from Myanmar. His wife is from Thailand. So that was very interesting. We thought he was from Thailand. And when we sit down talking in one of our early classes, we found out actually he was born and raised in Myanmar, Burma. So that's new for us. We've got a student from Jamaica and one from New Zealand and another guy from the African continent who's a regular part-timer. So we're starting to be able to build back up to our regular numbers. Yeah, I think that's kind of the main updates of where we're at. It is a smaller class that we have on site and campus, but it's a dynamic class. I've never seen a class knit together so quickly, so openly. Great class to teach because they all interact. You know, sometimes other cultures that we have coming in are very quiet, especially Asian and some of the islanders. But yeah, they all interact, all want to learn, all want to, participate in the class. And so it's been a great class to teach this year. So that's a quick overview on how things are going at the Bible College. I may have mentioned that because we've developed a new online program for chaplaincy, and that's going very well, we're taking what we're learning from that and we're wanting to put our regular programs to be available online as well. You may be aware there's of course a worldwide trend. It's happening everywhere. Most learning institutions are doing it, have done that. We don't want to lose the residential campus. We still want people to come in, but there are people who can't. People who can't leave their countries, people who don't want to leave their work but want to study. And so we want to be able to have an online platform for them to learn in our regular Bible and ministry training programs. So we're just starting to develop that, and Lord willing, we'll have that registered and accredited and available beginning of 2025. Sounds like a long way away, doesn't it? But it's just around the corner. So I think that's pretty much an update on the work of the college. I'll give you an update on Jill and I at the end of this if you remind me to do that. All right. So, in terms of, this is the work of the college I've just talked about. And so we have this connection that God's opened doors. The work of the Bible College, someone mentioned, it's in my report, I believe, that this year we're going to have our 40th anniversary for the work of the Bible College. And that's pretty amazing. I talked to the people who founded the college. Jill and I went through as students back at the very beginning. And these teachers started the Bible College to train New Zealanders and be equipped to help lead church in New Zealand. That was their mission. But God opened up doors to the islands, then Australia, and then into Asia, and now dotted around the world. We've got students, graduates who are in Chile, South America, here in the States, in Europe, and Africa and Asia, and the islands. So God was the one who opened doors and broadened it to this way. If you're free in the middle of August, come visit. We're going to have our reunion August 18th. I'd love you to come visit with us. So I think the best thing that I can do here, rather than just carry on with the normal report of the college, is talk a little bit more in depth at how God is working through the lives of the graduates. They really are the fruit of the ministry that we're doing. So I'm going to begin with Abraham and Rachel. It took a year not to say Abraham and Sarah. Oh my. Oh, it was so hard. But anyway, somehow they skipped a generation or so, and it's Abraham and Rachel. Abraham and Rachel, I probably told you about them last year because they were students. Actually, they just graduated when I was here last year. And they left their children behind in Papua New Guinea to come train at the Bible College. Now that sounds almost horrific to us, to leave your children for a couple of years. But in some island cultures, that's just perfectly normal. They live in extended family units. Children often live with uncles, aunts, and grandparents, so it is quite normal. But still, it's a pretty big commitment. So they graduated and have gone back to Papua New Guinea. They are involved in a variety of ministries that start with preaching and teaching in their home village congregation. So that happens every week on a regular basis. But also have the opportunity to go out and visit other congregations, other villages, other towns, where they don't have full-time or even part-time preachers or leaders. And so they go and help participate and encourage other congregations as well. Both Abraham and Rachel have the opportunity to teach in a public high school. They can go in and teach religion, and so on a weekly basis they're able to go into a high school and teach a session on the Bible and Christianity. His main ministry is working with their own Bible college. Now Abraham is actually a second generation graduate from the Bible college. His parents, Jab and Becky, came to New Zealand, I want to say in the late 80s. And they went through the college, went home to their own congregation, was the preacher there, extremely evangelistic, fantastic couple, worked up in the highlands of Papua New Guinea for several years, quite a long time, but eventually ended up down in Lae as a teacher at their own Bible college, and probably for the last 20 years has been the principal, the head of the Melanesian Bible College. So Jab has sent his son Abraham to train and go home and eventually replace him and become the leader of the college. But at the moment, they've developed a English version of their college. So normally it's in Pidgin English, but they want to also have an English version. And so Abraham and Rachel have been working on developing the whole curriculum for that. It's a 2-year program, and then teaching that. So they've started teaching that this year, Rachel gets to teach the ladies' classes as well, so she's very active in the development of the curriculum and also teaching. They go out and participate in mission around Papua New Guinea. This is very often what they do for national events. They have a national youth conference, they have a national men's challenge, a national ladies' day, and they're dotted around different villages or towns in Papua New Guinea. And so Abraham's been involved in that. And obviously, through opening all of those doors and connecting people, God's mission is taking place. And people are being baptized and the kingdom is growing there in Papua New Guinea. And so you have that connection through our work in the ministry of the Bible College to the work in Papua New Guinea. And I was talking to Steve before, and he just reminded me you actually had a different connection in Papua New Guinea many, many years ago as well. And so what's interesting is the connections going on everywhere. I mentioned Andrea before. She came either in 2001 or...
I think it was 99 or 2000.
Yeah, all right. And then last week, I was at a congregation down in Oklahoma, and my connection there was a student who came through the Harding program in 2001, so a year or two after that. So, strong connections taking place all over the place. That's how God works. Moving across to Fiji. We've got lots of graduates in Fiji, and I'll just share Bobby's story as an example of that. Bobby is working in the northern group of the Fiji Islands. So the main, down the bottom is the main island where the capital is and the bigger cities, but he's up on the northern island group. There are at least 5, possibly 6 different congregations there, but he's the only person in ministry, in paid ministry on the Northern Island group. So he's based with his home congregation and regularly teaches and preaches there, but also on different occasions goes out and is involved in circuit preaching and teaching around these other congregations. Another ministry that he's developed is what he calls Helping Hands Ministry. They suffer a lot with cyclones and various natural disasters that happen. And so he has a group of men from his village and the church who are active in helping repair and restore broken things. That may be roof that's come off the top of a house, it may be the side of the house that's fallen off. They had a cyclone, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, washed out the bridge. They built a new bridge. Those are kind of big things, little things that might be repairing bathrooms, things inside houses. So he has this Helping Hands ministry to help people physically, but of course that gives introduction to sharing the story of Jesus as well. They have a regular ladies class, and after or in additional to the Bible teaching, they teach them some craft skills. Where Bobby lives is a very poor village. Actually, I learned it's a squatter's village. So they don't own the land, they don't have a natural right to be there. They have permission from the local chief to build their residences there, but they're squatters. They don't own the land, they don't belong there. So they're a very poor village. But teaching them crafts so they can make things to go sell at the market and help provide a little bit of income for those poorer families. They have a regular children's program, and so they have 30 or 40 children turn up on Friday afternoons, just have fun together, learning Bible stories, playing in a healthy environment. Visitation to hospitals. I think they also have a prison ministry as well. So you can see a lot of diversity that's happening with Bobby. Men's breakfast once a month, but helping to train the leadership of his local church. And then he's just developed, in the last 18 months or so, a ministry for young people. They're finishing high school, ready to go into a career, but they live in an impoverished part of Fiji. There's not a lot of opportunity. And so he's teaching them horticulture. how to cultivate the ground, plant crops, and help provide food for their families. Again, lots of baptisms. I think this year there's 5 or 6 I've read of baptisms that Bobby's had as a result of all of these different ministries where God's opened these doors and connected people and allowed his mission. So there we have another connection between Maryland Heights and the work happening in Fiji. God has opened those doors, connected Bobby through us with you, and he's out doing God's mission in Fiji. Just a representative of others who are also there in Fiji. Moving across to the Philippines, we have this lovely couple, Raj and Daya. They are, when they first went back, they tried to plant a church in he wanted to go to his father's home island and plant a church where there wasn't a church. And they were there probably 8, maybe 12 months, making headways there, but they had a lot of opposition. Which turned into persecution. And so they ended up having to leave that island. Went back to Manila, where they came to us from, and started a church out of their own home. And so this is the church that meets in the basement area of their home. Great small church there. Like Bobby, is active in preaching and teaching elsewhere, so once or twice a month, Sunday nights, he's out visiting other churches, helping to preach and teach at those congregations. He's involved in their own leadership training school that they have there in Manila, and so once a week, on I think Monday nights, he teaches in their Bible school program. Very evangelistic. They're out on the streets, door knocking, meeting people, wanting to share the gospel. They work with other church leaders to arrange youth camps. They participate in medical missions, various ladies get-togethers, and the list goes on. They're just a very, very, very active couple, involved in many different sorts of ministries. Daya has a specialty. She's involved in a lot that her and her husband do together, but she's very good with the children and has developed a real significant children's ministry in their church. And that's visiting in some rest homes, visiting with the elderly, and again, baptisms happening quite regularly through the ministries that they are doing there in the Philippines. Now, we just learnt a month or so ago that they have been invited to go and work in Hong Kong. And so they've worked for half a dozen years there in the Philippines, done a great ministry. Most of these graduates, in fact, probably all of these graduates, they're working by themselves. They don't have an eldership. They don't have a structured ministry church. They are the leaders. And so while they do a great ministry, it also can be taxing. It's a heavy burden. Raj and Daya probably carry on doing that, but they feel being called by God to a new door. And they were approached by this church in Hong Kong. I'm not that familiar with Hong Kong, but I have been to this congregation. There's probably 3 or 4 congregations in Hong Kong. This particular congregation has a large Filipino membership. A lot of people from the Philippines are there in Hong Kong working and congregate at this congregation. And so they're actually going to work really with their own people there in Hong Kong. So they're just ready for a change in ministry. And I think as we speak, they're on their way. They've got their work visas, and they'll be transitioning to working with a local church there in Hong Kong. So God continues to open doors. Just all of those other ministries we've talked about. And so we have a connection through their work with the college and with you helping us in our ministry to ministry that's taking place in the Philippines and soon, if not now, in Hong Kong. And then the last group I do want to mention is this wonderful couple from Chile, Marcelo and Matresa. And after graduating from the college, they wanted to go and plant a church in his hometown in La Serena in Chile. No other Church of Christ there until they turned up to plant the church. Very evangelistic couple. Marcelo was probably a 9 on the 0 to 9 scale of being an extrovert, has no problem connecting with people, and is a joy to be around. He's full of life, bounces along with lots and lots of energy. This is teaching a group of men who are in a rehab centre, and I think there's some of them about to be baptised in the ocean just behind us. This is meeting in their home. Their COVID lockdown have been a little bit stricter than perhaps yours and ours, and so it's only just in the last couple of months, if that, last 4 to 6 weeks, that they've been able to gather as a church together again. Prior to that, they were online for a long time. Then they met in their own home for a while. But now they've just secured I think a restaurant. They go in Sunday mornings and can meet in a restaurant for worship. So leading the local church, teaching and preaching there. They've done lots of different ministries, but one of the ones that God's opened up more recently is working with this group of about 50 to 60 families who have built their houses on we would say a rubbish dump. I don't know what you call it. Yep. All right. If you've been out into some third world countries, you've probably seen this elsewhere. Very, very poor people who just basically gather stuff they find on the rubbish dump to build their house. You can't even call it a house, a shack to live in. And so they've been going on a monthly basis to minister to these people, take them boxes of food. They call them hope boxes, and so they go and deliver boxes of food and supplies to these families. That has developed into what they call a hope kitchen. And so now they're going 3 times a week to run a soup kitchen in this village and help feed the children on a more regular basis. As I mentioned before, you're a very evangelistic couple, and so often studying with people, the gospel, having people into their house for Bible studies and fellowship. They love to fellowship in South America and in Chile. So they do that very regularly. Teaching and preaching again. I was going to say this year, it might have been late last year. They coordinated the National Ladies Retreat. So all the South American churches get together once a year for a retreat. And last year, I believe it was last year, if not early this year, they organised the national retreat. Continental retreat for churches in South America. And again, just a picture of a Bible study right before a baptism. So an extremely evangelistic couple doing great ministry. And so again, more connections, God opening doors, connecting us all so that his mission takes place. So that's kind of an overview of where we're at, very briefly of our ministry in the college, but more specifically the work of our graduates that are only there because you responded to an open door, helped support us, and allow us to do our ministry. So I've got a couple of things to mention. Someone's going to remind me to talk about. Okay, so we've still got 5 or 10 minutes. So let me just pause before I do that and say, any questions about what we've covered?
Did you say Pidgin English?
Yes, yes, Pidgin English.
Is that in Papua New Guinea?
Yes, so Papua New Guinea, I don't have a picture there, but Papua New Guinea, New Guinea is 2 sides. You've got Papua New Guinea and then you've got, I think they just call it Guinea. So Papua New Guinea is the eastern side, heavily influenced by, German immigrants, British, and then more later Australian. The other side, the western side, is very, very, very remote. So on the eastern side, of Papua New Guinea. Down the bottom, they have 800 languages. Okay. On the north, that was more influenced by Westerners, they have Pidgin English. And so it's just English, but their local stuff thrown in. I can't even say any of those words, but yeah. You'd recognise, in a sentence, you'd recognise the words if they're written down. But when they speak fast enough, it just sounds like any other foreign language.
So, relating back to what you were saying about Paul, and some doors being closed, have you noticed anything happening like that as some of your graduates go out and they want to go one direction, but they find out they go a different direction?
Yeah. So Raj and Day are an example, a specific example, wanting to plant a church in their father's home island. Just didn't work. Another of our Fiji graduates, this would have been from the late 80s, early 90s. He came from the family of chiefs. So when his father passed away, his right was to be the chief of that local village and area. By history, they would be maybe a Presbyterian background or Church of England background, I can't remember. As a chief, he controls the village. I mean, they're very respectful people, but they disrespected him because he brings a different message. And I guess they almost drove him out of the village. He chose to leave, but it would have been difficult to stay. They were doing things, persecution, that you wouldn't do to your chief, let alone anyone else. So yeah, so that would be another example. Yeah, I'm sure there's a few others, but there's a couple that come to mind. Yep. I guess my role at the Bible College is probably a response to that. Many years ago, I told you our own personal story and how Jill and I went to the Bible College. I don't have time to talk about that now. But I was comfortable. I was just comfortable sitting on the pew doing ministry in a local church, and God opened a door and rocked our world. And then we went out into ministry with a local church for 10 years. And one day, I was driving home from the office, church office home, and I was just thinking, wow, life is great. I love this place. I love working with this church. I don't want to do anything else. It's all about what I like and I want. And as a result of that thinking, God opened the door for us to move to the Bible College and do this ministry. I wasn't looking for that. But yeah, so that's, yep. And what I want to say also is, this is great that I tell you about what's happening in New Zealand around the Pacific, but this happens here. You know, if you get up in the morning and pray, God, open some doors today, start looking for what God will do. And most of the time, I'm speaking to myself now, most of the time I don't think about that on a daily basis. But God opens the doors for us on a daily, weekly basis to meet someone and connect us. And we need to be open and responsive to that.
Chaplaincy, what exactly, I think of a chaplain like in the military.
Yes.
But
yeah.
What exactly does the chaplaincy program do?
So basically, this is very interesting because New Zealand has rapidly become a post-Christian society, but there's a surge in the need for chaplaincy. I think those two go together. And so we have chaplains in our military. In fact, most of the chaplains that we've trained, that we have direct contact with, are in the military. We have chaplains in hospitals, we have chaplains in high schools. They're now looking at chaplaincy in primary schools, or do you call it elementary schools? When we developed the program, one of our board members said that, yeah, they've got chaplaincies in sports teams now. I'm like, what? And he was just saying, look, at home, we don't have nuclear families anymore. You're a minority. So you've got families that don't have mum and dad both at home, children under a lot of pressure, an element of dysfunctionality in community, and they go into these sports teams where they have to excel up here, and these kids can't cope, and they need chaplains to help them. And I'm just like, wow. So yeah, hospital, everywhere. Corporations are employing them. Yeah. So yeah, I was a little surprised myself, but it's a real growing need. Okay, got to get on to the important stuff then. So, I think I promised, no, I shouldn't have done that. I think I said I'd like to bring Jill with me, because it's been a long time since she's been here. And last year that was the plan, but she got COVID the day we landed in the States, and I had to leave her behind with friends in Denver, so she couldn't make it last year. And then lo and behold, our youngest daughter had a baby 4 weeks ago. Of course, we knew that was happening, and Jill said, I'm not coming with you for some reason. Well, I'm just like, I don't understand that, but anyway. So we have a brand new grandson, and these actually were taken from the day or the week that he was born. And this is our youngest daughter, Emma, with her 2-year-old Lucy, who's a pure delight, and Oliver. Again, yeah, that was the day he was born. And then that's 5 of our grandchildren who all live in the same town. We have one more, but they live a little bit further away. So he's not in that picture. And we've got some children as well, but they're not important, hey? So just the grandkids now. But I did want to mention, it's for those who've got grandchildren, it's just a delight, isn't it? So Jill said, you've got to show those pictures because, yeah, that's the really important stuff. But Jill has worked part-time for the college, 15 years, I think, in 2 different periods. And she used to do most of the work with the students, so recruiting, the immigration, housing, finances, and then the pastoral care of them on site. And so she's ready for a change, prompted by grandchildren. She wants to spend more time with the grandchildren. But as a ministry, she's going to turn her focus from students to graduates and graduate women. So we've mentioned, I think, 3 in my presentation, and there's a string of others. And these ladies are working. Some of them are single, most of them are married, their husbands are in ministry, they're in ministry together, they're in isolated places without much support. And her passion and her gifting is to help mentor and guide and encourage them. And so her focus is going to shift on a part-time basis to spending time weekly, online, Zooming with them, touching base with them, and Lord willing, once a year, being able to visit around those different ladies and just to help encourage them. We want these students, graduates, to be in ministry long term, and they need that support. We've noticed with COVID, we haven't been able to travel for that 3-year period. So all the ones that I've mentioned have not had visits from any of us staff on the college, or Jill and I personally, and it's had an effect where they've worked in isolation for 3 or 4 years without any guidance and help from outside. And they don't need us to help, they're doing their ministry, but they just need support and they just need encouragement.
Steve, can you speak to, and I don't remember the name of the ministry, but Jill was involved in like rehab rescue. I don't know if she's obviously not there anymore, but in time
Yeah.
she used to make her trips. Just
Yeah.
briefly so they know.
Yeah, so I can't even put a date on this now, maybe 12 to 15 years ago. Jill was involved in a ministry in Bangkok working in the red light districts. This ministry was on the same street as the red light district. A Christian organisation that basically went in to the bars and where the ladies prostitutes were and ministered to them. And if they were interested, would say, hey, we can give you a whole different lifestyle, teach you, train you how to work and earn an income and get out of that lifestyle. she's still involved in that, still visits. She'll be going in October to visit, mainly just to go and encourage and support them, but also introduce others to that ministry. So every time she goes, she's taking people from New Zealand, Australia, or our local graduates to introduce them. Yep. All right, thank you. I think I'm past time.
That lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven.